My wife's idea of helping her sick mother involves more designer perfume than medical supplies. Funny how that works. I'll be back tomorrow night, honey, Cara said, checking her reflection in our hallway mirror for the third time. She adjusted her low-cut blouse, not exactly nursing home attire. Mom's having a rough patch with her medication. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand, as my 29-year-old wife primped like she was heading to a cocktail party instead of a sickbed. The expensive perfume cloud around her could choke a horse. Need any help? I asked, knowing the answer. No. You know how she gets around you. Cara grabbed her overnight bag, packed suspiciously light for a caregiving mission. Besides, you've got that big landscaping job at the Morrison place tomorrow. True enough. At 48, I'd built Weston Landscaping from nothing into the best yard service in our little New England town of Millbrook. 23 years of sweat, dirt under my fingernails, and enough mulch to fill Fenway Park. But something about Cara's nervous energy set my teeth on edge. She kissed my cheek, a quick peck that barely made contact. Love you. Love you too, I replied, watching her hurry to her silver Honda. Through the window, I saw her fumble with her phone before starting the engine. Text messages at 7 in the evening? To her fading mother? I trust my wife about as far as I can throw my F-150. After her taillights disappeared down our gravel driveway, I called Tommy Pierce, my business partner for the last 15 years. Tommy knew every secret in Millbrook, mostly because his wife Dolores ran the beauty salon where all the town gossip got shampooed and blow-dried. Tommy, what's the word on Cara's mother? Dolores mention anything about her being sick? A pause. Eli, buddy, Mrs. Chen's been gone for 6 months, remember? We sent flowers to the funeral. My coffee mug hit the kitchen counter harder than I intended. Right, of course. Thanks, Tommy. Everything okay? Just fine. See you tomorrow. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the black window. Graying temples, weathered face, hands that looked older than my years. But my mind was sharp as the day I started this business. Sharp enough to know when I was being played. An hour later, I was parked across from the Millbrook Inn, engine off, watching the front entrance. The place wasn't much. 2 stories of faded brick with a neon sign that flickered between vacancy and no vacancy, like it couldn't make up its mind. But it was discreet, and the rooms were cheap enough for someone spending money that wasn't theirs. Cara's Honda sat in the parking lot like evidence at a crime scene. I waited. A hand waited. My landscaping work had taught me patience. Sometimes you had to watch grass grow, literally. But this was different. This was watching my marriage fade in real time. At 9:47 p.m., the door to room 237 opened. My wife stepped out first, hair messed up, lipstick gone. She looked around nervously before heading to her car. Then came the second figure. My son, Jake. 24 years old, personal trainer at the local gym, built like the college football player he used to be. My own son. Walking out of a hotel room where my wife had just been, adjusting his shirt and running fingers through his dark hair. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. The kid I'd raised, taught to throw a football, helped through his parents' divorce when he was 12. The wife I'd married 3 years ago, who'd sworn she loved me despite our age difference. They didn't see each other to the parking lot. Cara left first, then Jake 5 minutes later in his black pickup truck. Professional discretion. They'd done this before. I sat there for another hour, letting the rage build and then crystallize into something colder, something useful. When I finally drove home, I went straight to my workshop behind the house. Among the rakes and hedge trimmers, I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. Day 1, I wrote at the top. They think I'll fall apart. They think I'll cry, beg, make a scene. They have no idea who they're dealing with. I'd built a business from nothing. I'd survived a bitter divorce from Jake's mother. I'd weathered economic downturns, equipment failures, and competitors who tried to undercut me at every turn. 2 cheating idiots. This was going to be almost too easy. The next morning, I woke up with the clarity that comes from having a purpose. Cara's text had arrived at 6 a.m. Mom had a bad night. Might need to stay another day. Miss you. I texted back, take all the time you need, sweetheart. And I meant it. The more time she spent digging her own grave, the deeper I could make it. First stop was the Millbrook Inn. The manager, Mrs. Blevins, had been running the place since before I was born. She knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it for the right price. Eli Weston, she called out when I walked into the lobby. Don't tell me you're looking for a room. Trouble in paradise? Nothing like that, Mrs. B. Actually, I'm worried about my son Jake. His mother thinks he might be. Well, you know how young men get. Gambling, drinking, maybe meeting the wrong kind of women. Mrs. Blevins leaned across the front desk conspiratorially. Oh, honey, I don't like to gossip, but... That boy of yours has been renting room 237 twice a week for the past 2 months. Always pays cash, always brings the same blonde woman. Pretty little thing, but she's got that look, like butter wouldn't melt. I slipped her a $50 bill. I don't suppose you have security cameras. Well, we're not supposed to, but for a concerned father... She glanced around the empty lobby. Check your email tonight. Next, I drove to my office, a converted barn on the outskirts of town where I kept the trucks, equipment, and business records. Tommy was already there, loading mulch bags. You look like hell, he said. Feel worse. Tommy, I need a favor. Can you help me go through the books? I think someone's been skimming. Tommy's expression darkened. He'd been with me since the beginning, and he took theft personally. Who? Rather not say until I'm sure. We spent the next 2 hours going through payroll records, expense accounts, and petty cash logs. What I found made my pressure spike. Jake had been on the company payroll for 8 months as a consultant, a job I'd never authorized. Cara had been using the company credit card for business expenses that included lingerie, expensive dinners, and hotel charges. They'd stolen nearly $8,000. Jesus, Eli, Tommy whistled. This is embezzlement. You could have them arrested. I could, I agreed, but that would be too quick. That evening, I sat in Murphy's pub, the local watering hole where half of Millbrook came to drink away their problems. The other half came to hear about everyone else's problems. Eli, called out Mike Santos from behind the bar, where's that pretty wife of yours tonight? Taking care of her sick mother, I said, settling onto a bar stool. You know how it is. St. Cara, laughed Dolores Pierce from her usual corner booth, always helping someone. Funny thing, said Betty Walsh, the town's biggest gossip. I could have sworn I saw her car at the Millbrook Inn yesterday. Thought maybe her mother was staying there for some reason. The bar went quiet. In a town of 3,000 people, everyone knew everyone else's business, or thought they did. Must have been someone else's car, I said mildly. Cara's mother lives over in Springfield. Course, Betty backtracked quickly, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. Latte, I finished my beer and headed home, where Mrs. Blevins' email was waiting. The security footage was grainy but clear enough. Cara and Jake entering room 237 together at 8:15 p.m., both of them leaving separately around 10 p.m. I forwarded the video to my lawyer with a note. Need to discuss divorce proceedings and criminal charges. Available tomorrow. Then I opened my laptop and started making changes. First, I removed Jake from the company payroll. Then I canceled Cara's access to all business accounts and credit cards. Finally, I changed the locks on the office and had new security codes installed on the equipment. My phone rang at 11:30 p.m. Jake. Dad, I'm getting some weird message about my paycheck being canceled. There must be some mistake. No mistake, son. A pause. Well, what do you mean? I mean you're fired. Effective immediately. Don't come around the office anymore. Dad, I don't understand. I hung up. 2 minutes later, Cara called. Eli, honey, my credit card was declined at the pharmacy. Can you call the bank? Already did. Told them to freeze the account due to fraudulent charges. What? Eli, what's going on? You're scaring me. Am I? How's your mother, Cara? Long pause. She's resting. Good. Give her my regards. Oh, wait. You can't. She's been gone for 6 months. The line went quiet except for the sound of Cara's breathing. We need to talk, she finally said. We certainly do, but not tonight. I'm tired, and tomorrow's going to be a very busy day. I hung up and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. Outside, rain started pattering against the windows of the house I'd bought with 20 years of honest work. Tomorrow, the real fun would begin. Cara came home the next morning looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Her makeup was smeared, her clothes wrinkled, and her hands shook as she fumbled with her keys at the front door. I was waiting in the kitchen with coffee and a manila folder full of evidence. Sit down, I said. Eli, I can explain. Sit down. She sat, clutching her purse like a life preserver. I slid the folder across the table. Hotel security footage, I said calmly. Bank records showing unauthorized charges, payroll documents with forged signatures, and my personal favorite, a receipt from Victoria's Secret charged to my business account. Did you wear that lingerie for Jake, or was it a gift for someone else? Cara opened the folder with trembling fingers. Her face went white as she flipped through the pages. "This isn't what it looks like," she whispered. "Really? Because it looks like my wife and my son have been screwing each other behind my back while stealing money from my business. What does it look like to you?" Tears started flowing, the kind of dramatic sobbing that had worked on me for 3 years of marriage. But I was done being manipulated. "Please, Eli, it just happened. We never meant for it to go this far." "How far? How long has this been going on?" 6 months, she admitted. "Maybe 7. Since right after your mother's funeral. Classy timing." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I want my money back. I want you out of my house. And I want both of you to understand that there are consequences for betraying people who trust you." "Are you going to call the police?" "I'm considering it. Embezzlement is a felony in Massachusetts. You could both do prison time." "Please don't. I'll pay back every penny. Jake will too. We'll disappear, move away, whatever you want." I stood up and walked to the window overlooking my perfectly manicured lawn. Every blade of grass, every flower bed, every tree had been planned and maintained by my own hands. Order from chaos. Beauty from dirt. "You know what the difference is between a weed and a flower, Cara?" What?" "Location. A dandelion in a field is just part of nature. A dandelion in my garden is a weed that needs to be removed." I turned back to face her. "You and Jake are weeds, and I'm very good at removing weeds." That afternoon, I drove to Jake's apartment complex on the other side of town. He lived in a converted warehouse that had been turned into trendy lofts for young professionals, the kind of place that charged premium rent for exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. I found him in the parking lot, loading gym equipment into his truck. "Going somewhere?" I asked. He spun around, nearly dropping a set of dumbbells on his feet. "Dad, I was just—" "Running away? Smart move, but not smart enough." Jake straightened up, trying to look intimidating. He had 4 inches and 40 pounds on me, but I'd been in more fights than he'd had hot dinners. "Look, Dad, I know you're upset." "Upset?" I stepped closer. "Son, upset is when my coffee gets cold. Upset is when it rains on the weekend. What I am is furious. What I am is betrayed. What I am is done being your father." "You don't mean that." "Try me." We stood there in the parking lot, father and son, staring at each other across a gulf that had opened up overnight. Other residents walked by, pretending not to notice the tension. "She seduced me," Jake said finally. "Cara, she came on to me first." "So you're a victim now?" Poor Jake, helpless against the advances of his stepmother. "It wasn't like that." "What was it like? Walk me through it. Did you think about me when you were screwing my wife? Did you laugh about what a fool I was?" Jake's face flushed red. "We never talked about you. Even worse, I wasn't even worth mentioning." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken of his gym membership cancellation form. "Effective tomorrow, you're banned from Millbrook Fitness. Seems the owner doesn't appreciate trainers who engage in unethical behavior." "You can't do that. That's my livelihood." "I can, and I did. Jim Morrison owns that gym, and he's been a client of mine for 10 years. Funny how word gets around in a small town." Jake's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me. I almost hoped he would. It would give me an excuse to finish this conversation the old-fashioned way. Instead, he deflated like a punctured tire. "What do you want from me?" "I want you gone. Out of town, out of my life, out of my sight. Take your whore stepmother with you." "Dad? Don't call me that. You lost the right when you stuck your dick in my wife." I turned and walked back to my truck, leaving him standing there with his mouth open. As I drove away, I saw him in my rearview mirror, still holding those dumbbells like he didn't know what to do with them. That evening, I went back to Murphy's pub. Word had already started to spread. Small towns are like that. Whispers followed me to the bar, and conversation stopped when I walked by. "Rough day?" Mike asked, sliding a beer across the bar. "Getting better by the hour." Dolores Pierce appeared at my elbow like a gossip-seeking missile. "Eli, honey, is it true what they're saying about Cara and Jake?" "What are they saying?" "That they... well, you know." "I know a lot of things, Dolores. You'll have to be more specific." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "That they were having an affair. That you caught them at the Millbrook Inn." I took a long sip of beer, letting the silence stretch out. The entire bar was listening now, pretending to watch the baseball game on TV while straining to hear every word. "Well," I said finally, "I suppose if people are talking, there must be some truth to it." The explosion of whispers that followed was like a dam bursting. Within an hour, everyone in Millbrook would know that Eli Weston's wife had been cheating with his own son. My phone buzzed with a text from Cara. "Please come home. We need to talk." I texted back, "No, we really don't." Then I ordered another beer and settled in to watch my reputation get rebuilt while theirs burned to the ground. By morning, the story had grown legs and started running. My phone rang at 6 a.m. with calls from friends, clients, and busybodies who wanted to express their sympathy or fish for details. I let them all go to voicemail. At 7, I drove to the office where Tommy was waiting with coffee and a grim expression. "Whole town's talking," he said. "Dolores fielded about 50 calls last night. Everyone wants to know if it's true." "What did she tell them?" "That you're a good man who deserves better. Smart woman, that's why you married her." We were loading equipment for the Morrison job when Jake's truck pulled into the parking lot. He climbed out looking like he hadn't slept, his usual cocky swagger replaced by something closer to desperation. "Dad, please, just give me 5 minutes." "You've got 2. Talk fast." Tommy moved closer, positioning himself between Jake and the office door. At 62, he was still built like the Marine he'd been 40 years ago. "I need my job back," Jake said. "The gym thing, I can't afford to lose everything." "Should have thought of that before you decided to play house with my wife." "It wasn't serious. It was just physical. It didn't mean anything. To you, maybe. To me, it means everything." Jake's voice cracked. "I'm your son." "No. My son faded the day he betrayed me. You're just some punk who shares my DNA." "Please, Dad." "Get off my property, now." Jake looked around desperately, seeing the crew members who had stopped working to watch the show. Men who had known him since he was a kid, who had taught him to drive the big mowers and operate the wood chippers. "You can't do this to me," he said, his voice rising. "I have rights." "You have the right to leave voluntarily or be escorted off by the police. That's it." Tommy stepped forward. "You heard him, Jake. Time to go." For a moment, I thought Jake might try to fight. His hands clenched, his shoulders tensed, and I saw the same stubborn streak that had gotten him in trouble as a kid. Then he seemed to remember that he was outnumbered 6-1 by men who worked with their hands for a living. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." He drove away spinning his tires on the gravel, leaving black marks that I'd have to clean up later. "Boss," said Miguel, one of my crew leaders, "you want us to change the security codes?" "Already done. And Miguel, if either of them shows up here again, call the police first and me second." That afternoon, Cara made her move. She showed up at Murphy's pub during the lunch rush, when half the town would be there to witness whatever scene she was planning. I was sitting at my usual spot at the bar when she walked in wearing a black dress that probably cost more than most people made in a week. Every conversation stopped as she made her way across the room. "Eli," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "we need to talk about this misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I replied without turning around. "You screwed my son. I caught you. End of story." "That's not fair. You're making me sound like some kind of monster." Now I did turn around, fixing her with the kind of stare I usually reserved for contractors who tried to cheat me. "What would you call it?" "A mistake. A moment of weakness. People make mistakes, Eli." "People make mistakes," I agreed. "They forget to put gas in the car. They overcook dinner. They don't steal $8,000 from their husband's business while screwing his son." The bar was silent now, except for the sound of the baseball game on TV. Even Mike had stopped pretending to clean glasses. I never stole anything," Cara said, but her voice wavered. I pulled out a folder, the same one I'd shown her at home, but now expanded with additional evidence. Victoria's Secret, charged to Weston Landscaping, $147. That was for Morton's Steakhouse, charged to Weston Landscaping, $212 for dinner for 2. Eli, please. Millbrook Inn, room charges going back 6 months, always paid for with my company credit card. I stood up and faced the crowd that had gathered around us. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present my wife, Cara Weston, devoted spouse, loving stepmother, and apparently professional thief." Cara's face went white, then red, then white again. "You bastard! You're humiliating me." "No," I said calmly. "You humiliated yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." She looked around the bar, seeing the faces of people she'd known for 3 years, neighbors, shopkeepers, friends who had welcomed her into their community when she married the local businessman. Not one of them looked sympathetic. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Funny. That's exactly what your boyfriend said this morning." She fled the bar with tears streaming down her face, leaving behind a crowd of people who couldn't wait to share what they'd just witnessed with everyone they knew. Mike set a fresh beer in front of me. On the house. Thanks. For what it's worth, Eli, we all knew something was off about those two. Just didn't want to be the ones to tell you. I know, small towns protect their own. Damn right we do. That evening, I sat on my front porch with a bourbon and watched the sun set over the hills surrounding Millbrook. My phone had been ringing all day with calls from reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the story, but I'd let them all go to voicemail. This wasn't about publicity. This was about justice. Tomorrow, I'd file the divorce papers and the criminal charges. Tomorrow, I'd make sure that everyone in 3 counties knew what happened to people who betrayed Eli Weston. But tonight, I was just going to sit here and enjoy the peace and quiet of a house that no longer contained any liars. 3 days later, Cara and Jake made their last desperate play. I was working late in my home office, updating client files and preparing for the court hearing scheduled for the following week, when I heard glass breaking in the kitchen. Most people would have called the police immediately, but I'd been expecting this. I turned off the lights and moved quietly through the house, listening to the sound of whispered voices and fumbling footsteps. They were trying to be quiet, but they'd clearly never broken into anywhere before. Where does he keep the safe? That was Cara's voice, high and nervous. How should I know? Check the bedroom. Jake sounded drunk or desperate, maybe both. I crept to the kitchen doorway and peered around the corner. They were both there, dressed in dark clothes like amateur cat burglars. Cara was rifling through my desk while Jake searched the living room with a flashlight. This is insane, Cara whispered. If he catches us, he's at the bar. Dolores said he's been drinking there every night since the divorce papers were filed. Wrong. I'd been at the bar until 9, then came home and parked in the garage instead of the driveway. An old trick I'd learned during my first divorce. I watched them for another minute, letting them incriminate themselves further, then stepped into the room and flipped on the lights. Looking for something? They both spun around like guilty children caught stealing cookies. Cara dropped the papers she'd been holding, and Jake nearly fell over a coffee table. Eli? Cara gasped. I needed to get some of my things. Through the kitchen window? Interesting technique. Jake straightened up, trying to look tough. We have a right to be here. Cara still lives here. Actually, she doesn't. The restraining order I filed yesterday says she can't come within 100 yards of this house. I pulled out my phone. Should I call the police now, or do you want to explain what you're really doing here? We need money, Cara said desperately. The lawyers, the court costs. We're broke. And whose fault is that? You destroyed our lives, Jake exploded. You turned the whole town against us. I told the truth. If that destroyed your lives, maybe you should have made better choices. Jake took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. He was bigger than me, younger than me, and angrier than me, but I'd been in more fights than he could imagine, and I wasn't the one with something to lose. Go ahead, I said quietly. Hit me. Give me another reason to have you arrested. He stopped, breathing hard, realizing he was trapped. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to leave, now, through the front door this time. And if I ever see either of you on my property again, I'll have you shot for trespassing. You can't, Cara started. I can. This is Massachusetts. Castle Doctrine applies. Look it up. They looked at each other, then back at me, finally understanding that they were completely out of options. The money we took, Cara said quietly. We'll pay it back. With what? You're both unemployed. We'll get jobs. We'll work it off. Where? I know every business owner in 3 counties. Who's going to hire a thief and a homewrecker? The silence that followed was answer enough. Get out, I said. Now. They left through the front door, walking past the broken glass in the kitchen like it was someone else's problem. I watched through the window as they got into Jake's truck and drove away. Then I called the police. Millbrook Police, this is Officer Martinez. This is Eli Weston on Maple Street. I'd like to report a break-in. Are you injured, sir? Are the perpetrators still on the premises? No to both, but I have them on security camera, and I know who they are. 20 minutes later, Detective Ruth Morrison was sitting in my living room, taking notes while I showed her the footage from my newly installed security system. That's definitely breaking and entering, she said. With the restraining order, it's also criminal trespass. You want to press charges? Absolutely. Both of them. Both of them. She closed her notebook and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. Eli, I've known you for 15 years. You're a good man, and what they did to you was wrong. But are you sure this is how you want to handle it? Once I file these charges, there's no going back. Detective, they stole from me, cheated on me, and broke into my house. What exactly would you have me go back to? Fair point. She stood up. I'll have warrants issued tomorrow morning. After she left, I poured myself a drink and called Tommy. "It's done," I said when he answered. "The break-in?" "All of it. By tomorrow night, they'll both be in jail." "Good. Maybe now you can get some peace." "Maybe." But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. In a town like Millbrook, scandals like this one had a way of echoing for years. People would remember, and they'd talk, and eventually the story would become legend. The businessman who caught his wife cheating with his own son. The revenge that destroyed 2 lives and rebuilt one. I could live with that legacy. The courthouse was packed on the morning of the hearing. Word had spread throughout Millbrook and beyond, drawing curious onlookers, reporters, and everyone who had ever known anyone involved in what the local newspaper was calling the Triangle Scandal. I sat at the plaintiff's table with my lawyer, David Chen, a sharp-dressed man from Boston who specialized in fraud cases. Across the aisle, Cara and Jake sat with a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They both looked terrible. Cara's designer wardrobe had been replaced by a cheap dress that hung loose on her shrinking frame. Jake's gym-toned physique seemed diminished, his shoulders hunched in defeat. "Good. Your Honor," David began when called upon. "This is a straightforward case of embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The defendant systematically stole money from Mr. Weston's business over a period of 8 months while conducting an illicit affair behind his back." He laid out the evidence methodically. Bank records, credit card statements, security footage, forged documents. The public defender tried to object, but Judge Patricia Walsh, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, shut him down. "The evidence is clear and overwhelming," she said after reviewing the files. "Mr. Weston, you're seeking full restitution plus damages?" "Yes, Your Honor. $8,437 in stolen funds, plus $15,000 in punitive damages." "And the criminal charges?" "Will be handled in a separate proceeding," Detective Morrison said from the gallery. Judge Walsh looked at Cara and Jake with the expression of someone who had seen too many cases like this one. "Do you have anything to say for yourselves?" Jake started to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back down. "No, Your Honor." "Then I find in favor of the plaintiff. Full restitution plus damages to be paid within 90 days. Court costs to be split between the defendants." The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us like hungry sharks. I ignored their questions and headed for my truck, but Jake caught up with me in the parking lot. "Dad, please." I turned around slowly. "What did you call me?" Eli. Mr. Weston." "Whatever. Please, just listen for 1 minute. You've got 30 seconds. We can't pay that judgment. We don't have jobs, we don't have money, we don't have anywhere to go. Not my problem. It was a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake. But we're family." "No," I interrupted. "We're not. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't betray each other. Family doesn't break into each other's houses." Cara appeared behind him, her face streaked with tears. "Eli, please, we're begging you." "You should have thought of this before you decided to play house with my money." "We'll leave town," Jake said desperately. "We'll disappear. You'll never see us again." "You're damn right I won't." I got in my truck and drove away, leaving them standing in the courthouse parking lot with their lawyer and a handful of reporters who were already losing interest. That evening, Murphy's Pub threw an impromptu celebration. It wasn't exactly a party, more like a wake for the old Eli Weston, the one who had been naive enough to trust his wife and son. "To Eli," Mike raised his glass, "who proved that nice guys don't always finish last." "To justice," added Dolores Pierce. "To family," said Tommy, "the kind you choose, not the kind that chooses you." I raised my own glass and looked around the room at the faces of people who had supported me through the worst period of my life. Neighbors, clients, friends who had known me for decades and never doubted my character. "To new beginnings," I said. We drank and talked, and gradually the conversation moved on to other topics. Baseball, weather, town politics. Normal things that normal people talked about in normal times. Around midnight, I walked home through the quiet streets of Millbrook. The house was dark and empty, but it felt clean in a way it hadn't for months. No lies hiding in the corners, no secrets lurking behind closed doors, just silence and peace, and the satisfaction of a job well done. I poured myself one last bourbon and stood on the front porch, looking out over the town that had rallied around me when I needed it most. Tomorrow, Cara and Jake would probably leave for good, driven out by shame and debt, and the knowledge that they would never be welcome here again. The triangle was broken. The betrayers were punished. The victim had become the victor. I raised my glass to the empty street and spoke the words that had been building inside me for weeks. Green lawns, black hearts. I pruned the rot and watched it wither. No apologies, no forgiveness, just my life. Finally, mine again. In the distance, a police siren wailed as someone else's drama played out in the darkness. But my drama was over. Ended not with violence or tragedy, but with the simple application of justice and the unwavering support of a community that knew right from wrong. I finished my drink, locked the door, and went to bed in a house that belonged only to me,